Hello, everybody tuning in. Today we have our first guest on our Black Youth Mentorship Spotlight series. This is a guest that I'm very, very, very much excited to introduce to you all. And so I'm going to start with the introductions really shortly, and I'll keep it really short and sweet. Before we start today and have our conversation with our guest, I want to start off with a land acknowledgement. And we, Hamilton Center for Civic Inclusion, are hosting this from Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and the Mississaugas. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant. And I really want to talk about how interconnected these two things are, this program, the Black Youth Mentorship Program, and Indigenous sovereignty, and how these programs are created because we have these disparities in our communities, and how we want to center that as we speak. And while we talk about how our struggles are truly connected across our communities. And someone who is an incredible advocate and someone who has advocated for the Black community, Indigenous communities, and her community tirelessly and so bravely, and someone who is a great person to start off this program with is our guest today, Gachi Issa. Gachi Issa is the Black Justice Coordinator at the Hamilton Legal Clinic. More than that, she has been a community organizer on the ground with Hamilton Encampment Support Network and Defund Hamilton Police Service, Defund HPS, and formerly Hamilton Students for Justice. She was most recently part of the efforts that resulted in the culmination of the police liaison program at the HWDSB. And Gachi has advocated for a better Hamilton through a 2-week sit-in that was now called Freedom Camp outside City Hall, where protesters called for the defunding of the police and the investment in housing. And it was really a moment in Hamilton and a big turning point for advocacy and what is being said and talked about in the city. And finally, she is a proud older sister and someone that I am very, very proud to know. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce Gachi Issa.
Hi, thank you for the introduction. That was nice.
It's great to see you, Gachi.
Nice to see you too.
Awesome. So I'm going to throw your social medias on here. Anyone who's watching this, please give Gachi Issa a follow because she is awesome and deserves all of your follows. So without further ado, let's talk. Gachi and I are going to be talking a lot about her experience as a student organizer, a community organizer, her position now, how she got here. And I'm really gonna, be picking Gachi's brain. If anybody, in the chat or anybody watching has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And Gachi and I will address them as they come through. But without further ado, I wanted to ask my first question. And it's, what has your experience been like coming to this position? I've introduced you as the Black Justice Coordinator at the Hamilton Legal Clinic, but I'd like to know, what that means and how you got here before that. So maybe if we could start off, how did you come into organizing, and what was that like, when you first started?
So I think I officially came into organizing when I was 17 in high school. I was a part of like a Muslim group, and we didn't have prayer, like Friday prayers, for like 3 months. And like that, I think, kind of got us really angry, and we saw like a lot of injustices and racism happening in the school. And we just talked to like the people around us. We talked to our community, like our MSA, our Muslim Student Association, became like a hub for other people of color to just talk about their experiences. And I think from then, like, I don't know, like I think I caught a bug or something just happened and I couldn't stop, because I think once your door opens to organizing, it's hard to close it.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I've been organizing, I would say, like continuously ever since. And it's been like a very wild journey and I think a unique experience, but I think I'm really grateful for it. And I think to come into it so young and to learn about it was actually really helpful. So I think that's how I came into it. It was just honestly by chance and like through my community, and now
Mm-hmm.
I'm here.
And now you're here, yeah. And yeah, that is such like a tender age also at 17. I feel like, a lot of the organizers that I speak to, they come into this work because of, a failure that like the systems has created for them that they wanted to change. And that rings true in your story as well, as, you guys didn't have a place for prayer, and it shows the interconnectedness. And that's why I think it's so important, stories like yours, where students see a disparity, or they see something that's unfair, and they just genuinely want to change that,
Mm-hmm.
and you guys did that.
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah.
mhm,
Sorry, I was just gonna say that I think like when you're 17 and when you're young, you feel really powerless. But I think like what I learned is, especially at that age, like we have a lot of power. And
mhm,
I think like especially as youth, we have so much power in our hands and in our hearts. And I think people convince us otherwise. And what I've learned is that like that's not true. Young people are the ones who commit the most change.
mhm,
Um, and so that's like a truth that I uncovered. And like at the same time, 17 is really young. And I think like as much as it was important for me to do that advocacy, like we shouldn't have had to do that, you know? And
mhm,
I think part of it also robs your youth. But I think there's like an empowering aspect to that, that like you
absolutely.
actually have the power and the ability to create your own change and to demand things too.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that balance is so important. And,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's a good question to segue us. If you could tell us a little bit about your experience with HS4J, formerly HWDSB Kids Needs Help, as a student organizer throughout high school who, eventually gets this a true win for the community, and what that experience was like. High school facing adversity. What was it like founding HS4J in those early years, and what did it mean? Terminating the liaison program eventually um,
Mm-hmm.
in 2020.
Yeah, it was like a long campaign and like years long, like I would say 4 or 5 years, like as a process. And like
Mhm.
it wasn't just me, it was like Sabrina, there was a person named Rain, Sarah, and a lot of us just came together and founded this group. And again, like a lot of it, like the reason that we founded that group was to reclaim our power. When we were younger, we spent like most of my grade 12 year was spent in meetings with admission, and like meetings talking to them, pleading to them, asking them for help. And although that's important, like what we realized is that we actually have a lot of power in ourselves and in the community. And so like we shifted gears, and like we used this platform to call the board out, to be loud in a way that we were never allowed to do, to be like really bold in our asks and our demand. And like what happened is that like we secured wins, not necessarily because we were in private meetings with people, but because like we rallied communities around us. And then like through HS4J, we did town halls with our community. Like we did a lot of like nitty gritty work. We talked to people, understood how does policing work in schools, and like we learned like a lot from students. Like students would be carded in their hallways, students were falsely arrested, and were followed home. And like I think what happened is that there was like a month or 2 month long like serious campaign that kind of started the termination of the police liaison program, but there was like years of that grunt work of like talking to people and like town halls and closed door meetings and understanding the institution itself. And so I think like a lot of organizing is that grunt work and not just the public facing ones. And so I think I learned the most as an organizer through that process is that it takes time and it takes a lot of really small wins and building community and connections. And I think the rest will follow, like the wins will also follow too. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah, I think, and I think there's a lot to learn, like, even me myself as I hear that, about, how those little wins add up, right? And how, those meetings can feel really annoying, can feel really bureaucratic, can be really disheartening for student organizers who are trying to see change within their institutions, but those things can add up, especially when you're building up credibility for a movement, you're building up just mobility period amongst the students, morale amongst the students, those small things do matter. So I'm writing that stuff down myself, I think.
Yeah. And like even a small win is like building community. A small win is like building connections with other students in other schools. Like that is actually not a small win. It's actually a huge win, more than like the material, like, changes that you create. Like, I think the connections and the friendships that you build are actually way more important because what we have and what we'll take with us is our community, and I think the rest will follow. And that's what I've learned, is like, we've slowly were able to like build a wider and wider community around us that then supported us in the termination of the program. And so, yeah, that's what I learned.
I really like that. I want to put that, make connections within your community, the rest will follow. I really like, the way that you put that, because I think sometimes we can get caught up in, these big wins and, and seeing it as like a win-loss situation, but even making a connection is such a huge, huge win. And I think let's talk a little bit about even the big wins, now, so we've talked a little bit about, how you made connections with Hamilton Students for Justice, and, eventually those things added up to that moment of, the termination of the program. And, I was there. I remember when it happened, but, I would love to hear it especially from your point of view of what that felt like, after years of organizing, years of, advocating for something, and then, finally getting what that night meant to you and what you remember from that night, and what that meant for, Sabrina and you and Jem, some of those people who have been there for years, advocating for years, while other people are just tuning in recently, and what that was like.
Yeah. Like, to set the scene, it was like a 6-hour sit-in in front of City Hall. And we were there, for 6 hours. It started to rain, and people were scared about the equipment. And I remember at just one moment, like, we put ponchos on and we started dancing. And I think, like, that is what even more than the win, that's what I remember the most. Because I'm like, there's actually so much joy in organizing, in building community. And like, to me, I felt free in that moment, And I think that was really beautiful. And I think like when we won, it was like a release, like it felt like such an important and historic win, not only for Hamilton, but like in the province. And I think like, I don't know, like this was in the midst of people, like Black people around the world dying, you know, like it was like such a difficult time even for me. And I think like as much as like I hold the win, I also hold like that grief with me too. And it was like everything at once, every emotion that I could feel at once. But like, yeah, the memory I hold like closest to my heart is like dancing in the rain and feeling free, because I'm like, that is the joy in organizing that I like long for, you know. And I think like, to me, more than any material win, although that big win was like amazing, like we were just Black people and people of color dancing in the street, like in the rain, you know. And it's like, yes, this anger, like this work comes from anger, and it comes from grief, but it also comes from so much joy and also so much love for our community. And I felt like so much love in that moment. So yeah.
Yeah, you know, I think I remember seeing that, and the moment and how radical it was, you know, in the face of literal, you know, police danger, in the face of, you know, student trustees wanting the complete opposite. And in a moment in time when, you know, the world was facing, you know, the world still is, you know, facing, you know, this pandemic, you know, we have this sudden, you know, interest from people who are non-Black on a Black issue that, you know, Black blood like yourself have been advocating on for so long. You know, that emotional turmoil and roller coaster, to be able to dance in the rain in that moment was beautiful, and really a truly radical moment for, you know, everyone's spirit, and for the students on the ground, and for the people participating. And so, yeah, you know, as someone who lives in Hamilton, I don't know, I think, you know, thank you for making that space. You know, that was, yeah, that was really awesome, really radical.
Yeah. Yeah, and thank you to the like community who showed up and like showed out, because like nothing like this wouldn't have happened if people didn't call like for days,
Yeah.
like call their trustees, if people didn't email their trustees, if people weren't tweeting and, you know, like really bringing attention to this. And this is what I mean by like it is it is like more than one, two, or like three people. It is like a whole like I don't know, village of people who like make that happen. And generations of people who also like were doing that work beforehand and we don't even know about them, you know?
Exactly.
And like that win was like because of all of those people. And even securing that win now to ensure that it happens, like it requires like people to also stay on it, like trustees to also stay on it, like community members to also think about it. So like what I learned is like organizing is never really about like a couple of people, but it is about like the community that it creates. And that was like really cool to see in person. And I think it's like a moment I'll remember, I think, forever. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that moment. Yeah, it's definitely one that I will not forget myself. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
You know, so we talked a little bit about HS4J. You know, I want to switch gears a little bit from student organizing to your community organizing. And if you could tell me a little bit about Defund HPS, the creation of Hamilton Encampment Support Network, Mountain Mutual Aid also, you know, and then eventually we can go into your role with the legal clinic. But, you know, you've got so much organizing, you're so integrated within the community. I want to be able to get all of it. So if you could tell me a little bit about Defund HPS and HESN and what that was like in its creation and stuff. yeah, I'd love for you to share that story with everybody, because I think it's one that everyone should hear.
Mm-hmm. So I think how Defund started was that I think a bunch of us came together and realized this was in like the moment when like so many people were dying, and we realized that we want to not necessarily respond to issues, but like to like organize for something, to build something, and to connect like housing, policing, houselessness, and like really talk about racism and anti-Blackness in a way that is like holistic. So then Defund started. It started in June of 2020 or 2019, and we started by hosting like different live streams across the city with different demands for each institution, the university, the school board, for the provincial, municipal, and federal level. And then it kind of snowballed into like creative disruptions, also helping with the termination of the police liaison program, really focusing on the budget. And like, as you know, I think the best thing that Defund did, in my opinion, is like explaining defunding the police in a way that is accessible to the community, where people can like now know about it and talk about it. And what's important is connecting that to housing. The fact that there is no housing in Hamilton, and that is also a racial issue, that is also an issue related to poverty. And so then Freedom Camp happened, and that was a 2-week sit-in, and outside of City Hall. And again, like it was really beautiful to see like these two narratives come together. Like we're defunding the police and we're investing in housing, and how those two things are like central to it. Like I think a lot of like people like on our team have experienced like houselessness and housing insecurity, like as people of color, as Black people. And like I think it's like the first time I think that those two have been connected in like a material way. And then after Freedom Camp, the Hamilton Encampment Support Network was launched, and it's been growing ever since. There are so many volunteers on board who are connecting with houseless people on the ground and building community again, which is like important. Building relationships with people on the ground, not as like passive people, but as like people with dignity who can create friendships and reciprocal relationships. And so, yeah, all of those things have been happening together. HESN is like a really cool organization that is kind of now separate from Defund. And then Mountain Mutual Aid was also created. And that was to like address the service deserts on the mountain, the fact that there like are so many like poor people who live on the mountain, but who are surrounded also by like suburbs, you know, like I've lived in city housing all my life on the mountain, and like I'm surrounded by people who experience poverty. And the point of like Mountain Mutual Aid is not to like be a charity, but it's a way to build like mutual aid amongst each other. So like in my community, I've seen and learned the most about mutual aid. People like exchange food all the time, do grocery runs, like take care of each other's children out of a sense of community and love. And the hope is to build that across across the mountain. And I think it's on pause now, but beforehand we would deliver food kits to community, donated by community, every Saturday. And so that is a very quick history of
Yeah,
all the.
yeah, and you just zoomed through like everything like it was nothing. Like it's not like three incredible and amazing and very, very much needed organizations here in Hamilton that are doing a lot of the grunt work. and the grassroots organizing and filling those gaps and the disparities that are needed. And filling those disparities are so needed and vital in this time, and I think it's beautiful to see, especially through stuff like the Mountain Mutual Aid Network, HWDSB, how, when we see the system is failing us, it's people amongst our community, volunteers who are I don't know what I just dropped there, who are filling these gaps, and are making sure that our people are reached. So I'm very much looking forward to the obvious return of defund, of course, on a break, HWDSB, what we do in the next little bit, and Mountain Mutual Aid when they come back, to see what all these wonderful orgs do in the future. So thanks for running through, Defund HPS, HWDSB, Mountain Mutual Aid Network. I think I want to talk to you about your 9 to 5 now, what that means day to day, and what it's like being the new Black Justice Coordinator at the Hamilton Legal Clinic. This is such an important role, and something that it is incredible. But to be honest, I don't know exactly what that means and what you do day to day, and I would love to know what that means. So maybe if you could let us know what exactly the Black Justice Coordinator does at the legal clinic, and what your day-to-day looks like.
Okay, so the legal clinic in Hamilton has a Black Justice program. They also have an Indigenous Justice initiative and a Queer Justice initiative. And so then they have coordinators for each. And each role is kind of different. What I envision my role as being is one, connecting Black people to the justice system, to lawyers, to legal information, to important legal information like tenant rights or workers' rights. I really think that that's important for us. And I want to be able to connect communities to that important and necessary information. A lot of people have generational knowledge about that. A lot of us don't. And so I think that's an important part of Together We Rise, which is the Black Justice Initiative. And then also there's advocacy that happens. So the Black Justice Coordinator, in my role, I'm meant to do systemic work and advocacy in systems to make systems easier for us and to eventually bring us to justice. And so that means working with community organizations and groups. And so basically it's I'm an advocate kind of in the system. And so I think I have a lot of really cool visions about what I want to do as the coordinator. What my 9 to 5 looks like now is I think I'm still familiarizing myself with the territory. I mean, this is my first, I would say, big girl job, and with that comes a lot of responsibility. And so I'm still kind of learning. I'm building connections and relationships, which is also important to the work. But I really want this to be a resource for Black people to use continuously, for them to know what this is off the top of their head, to think of the Black Justice Initiative and use it as an important resource, because it is an important resource in the community that I don't think a lot of people know. And so my hope is to build, community knowledge, to put our issues, our election issues, on the map, to talk to tenants who are being displaced by the LRT, people of color, who are on that route, what are your rights as a tenant? And to really connect people to resources as much as possible. And I'm still figuring it out, so I don't know a lot, but I envision a lot of systemic work. And that also means I'm still working in the school board, working on an anti-Black racism policy, and like working with the Human Rights and Equity Committee of the board to review like trustee policy. Like all of these things like are part of my role. And so it's very flexible. Yeah.
Wow, that seems like so many things, and I'm very excited to see like, you know, what you do in this role, how this role plays out for you, because it seems like you've got great plans and a lot on your plate as the legal Black Justice coordinator, that I couldn't imagine anyone else doing the job better than you. So very excited to see what you do.
Thank you.
So we've talked about, you know, you becoming an organizer, what it was like as a student organizer, as a community organizer, now as a professional advocate and justice coordinator now. I want to know, you know, growing up, who were your role models and who did you look up to, maybe in mentorship, in a mentorship position, maybe to get yourself to where you are now? And whether that be, you know, personal people in your life or, you know, other people, I would love to start this conversation of basically who you looked up to, and whose hands, you know, guided you to get to where you are now.
Mm-hmm. Good question. I think like, I don't think I would be in a place of like semi-stability if it weren't for like the people around me. You know, like I mentioned that I come from a community where mutual aid is really like important. Like I wouldn't be here without the aunties who babysat me, or without the uncles who would like encourage me to finish high school, or without, you know, my mom who took care of us despite so much. I wouldn't be here without like the mentorship of people like Sarah Jama, who really like helped me blossom politically. She helped me think about strategy, like and gave me friendship too. I wouldn't be here without my friends, I think. And like I even think about like what does here mean, you know? Is this like do I feel like successful or stable? Not really, you know? But I think like I am grateful to be in a I'm grateful to have seen so many like wins. I'm grateful to have organized. I'm grateful to have danced in the rain, you know, like I'm grateful to have built community and friendships with people. And to me, like that is success, you know, more than anything else. And I think like throughout all of this, like, and this organizing, I'm also growing like a strong or stronger sense of self, you know. And I think I learn and I am because of my community, and I learn from them and identify myself through them, you know. So I think like to me that is the here, you know, that is like the like success, or like
Absolutely.
the mountain I'm standing on.
Yeah. You know, and I think that's such a good point to bring up, because, and especially, you know, in our, as the first speaker of the Spotlight series, you know, something that I think HCCI really wants to portray is that, you know, success isn't always what we have been trained to know, you know, what that means. It's not always, you know, every day, you know, doctor, engineer, your job is your success, and, you know, what you do and your position determines your success. You know, I think that's something that we're definitely trying to, you know, dismantle and recreate, and highlighting people who are successful in their connection to their community. You know, you are truly a millionaire in that way. You know, and so I think it's really important and really beautiful that you bring up that piece of the success that you brought, because undoubtedly you are very, very successful in that way. And so I think it's really important that a lot of the people, in our communities hear from you and hear about, what that looks like. And, and the success that you've had is also one that is lasting. And I think that that's something that is very specific, to Hamilton Students for Justice, Defund HPS, is these wins that are not just for yourself. It's not just for, a win for you. It's truly a win for the future generations, and for the future students that are coming through HWDSB, because they deserve better. And I think, those levels of success are undeniable. And so I think it's important that we all understand that, we don't always have to be stable, and clear cut, what society would deem as successful to be a successful person. You're absolutely a successful person. So would love to hear that. And so thank you for bringing that part up. And I think it segues us into my next question is, you talked about, the next generation and how they can be successful in different ways, and and gain wins from their community, and truly be successful through making those connections within their community. So what advice would you give to a young organizer, a young student organizer who may be coming into the work today, coming into advocacy? Do you have advice for them on how to maintain that mentality and how to achieve that success that isn't always so tangible, so easy to see? What advice do you have for young student organizers?
Yeah, good question. I think as an organizer, I don't claim to know everything. I think I have a couple of pieces of advice. One, trust yourself. I think that youth and young people are incredibly wise, and people tell us otherwise. So trust yourself and trust that you actually have power, as a community, that you can demand things from authority, that you can critique authority, that you can ask for something better. And you could do that very bravely. You don't have to sit in closed door meetings. You don't even have to talk in the way that they talk, but trust yourself and be brave, I think. And then I would say another piece of advice is to center your goal, because sometimes organizing goes like this instead of very kind of straight. And sometimes you lose sight of that goal and that vision. And the goal doesn't have to be terminate police liaison program or whatever. The goal could be building community with people, understanding what's going on. I would say also be bold. In Glendale, the students walked out, outside, for a really bad dressing policy or sexual assault policy. These students are bold, and they didn't care what teachers or administration said. You guys have power within yourselves, and you should unleash it. And I think the most important part that I as an advice that I would give is center your joy, because I don't think our community would want us to do otherwise, to live life fully. Because I think sometimes for me, for a long time, organizing was it for me. I had tunnel vision and that was it. But that's not living, and I don't think our community wishes that upon us. I think as Black people especially, we also deserve to feel free, to experience joy, to understand who we are, to discover ourselves. That is also a part of the work towards liberation. I think, it's a personal inward liberation, a sense of self, and so I think centering your joy, centering rest, centering peace, is really important, because I don't think people in power want that from us. They want to see us tired, and they want to see us give up. And I think it's like integral to the work to make sure that we are joyful and happy and rested and that we experience life fully. That's all my advice.
And wonderful pieces of advice, I must say, you know, and very appropriate, I think, you know, for right now, you know, for student organizers and for movements to remember, you know, to center your joy and to center your peace and your rest, because that's truly radical and they don't want to see that happen. And I think that's very important. And I think a beautiful place to end this conversation, you know, is to center joy, you know. Black joy is radical. I'm just looking through some of these great sound bites that you've made, just like as a recap. Make connections within your community and the rest will follow. Thank you so much for allowing me to pick your brain a little bit today, Gachi. For those of you who are, you know, still watching, please give Gachi a follow. Here is her Instagram. Also, please follow some of the amazing organizations that she is part of. Hamilton Students for Justice, Defund HPS, Hamilton Encampment Support Network, HWDSB, Mountain Mutual Aid Network, and lastly, the Hamilton Legal Clinic. Yeah, so thank you so much for talking today, Gachi, and for taking the time to, you know, to share your experiences as an organizer, as the Black Justice Coordinator, and as an awesome member of our community, and truly a local hero. So thank you so much, Gachi.
Thank you, Chance. This was nice. This was fun.
Awesome. Cool. Everybody watching at home, we're going to end the stream now. Thank you for tuning in. You can contact me at ccorden@hcci.ca if you have any questions for next week. Next week, we have Marcus Letts coming. He is a videographer and film director, and I'm excited to hear from him. So thank you so much, and hope to see you guys in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.